The first punch never landed. Instead, it stopped less than an inch from Ethan Carter's face. The ballroom fell into complete silence. Hundreds of executives, entrepreneurs, investors, and reporters watched without blinking. Crystal chandeliers reflected the bright stage lights, while dozens of smartphones were already recording the unexpected moment. Standing in front of Ethan was Isabella Vaughn. At 36, she had become one of the youngest CEOs in the country's cybersecurity industry. Her company protected multinational corporations from digital attacks worth billions of dollars. Business magazines called her the Iron CEO. Television hosts admired her discipline, confidence, and relentless work ethic. Outside the boardroom, she was just as formidable. She held a fourth-degree black belt and had trained in martial arts for over 20 years. Every morning began before sunrise with running, strength training, and sparring. She believed discipline solved nearly every problem in life. Her fist remained frozen only inches from Ethan's nose. "Too slow," she said confidently. Polite laughter spread through the audience. Ethan didn't react. He simply stood there with one hand resting on the shoulder of his 8-year-old daughter, Lily. His expression never changed. He wasn't frightened. He wasn't angry. He simply looked calm. "I'm not here to fight," he answered quietly. The conference host stepped toward the microphone. "Excellent demonstration. Awareness and confidence can prevent danger before it begins." The audience applauded enthusiastically. Ethan nodded respectfully toward Isabella, picked up Lily's backpack, and calmly stepped off the stage. Most people forgot about him within seconds. Isabella didn't. There had been something unusual about him. Not his appearance. He wore simple jeans, a blue shirt, and comfortable shoes. Nothing about him suggested wealth or importance. It was his eyes. People usually looked intimidated when facing her. Some looked impressed. Others looked competitive. Ethan had looked peaceful. Almost like someone watching rain fall outside a window. That bothered her far more than fear ever could. Earlier that morning Ethan had almost cancelled their trip to the conference. Lily had spent the entire week begging to attend. "Dad, they said they'll have drones. They're business drones. They still fly." He laughed. "You make a convincing argument." Since leaving the military 6 years earlier, Ethan had built a completely different life. He worked as a construction project manager. His days were filled with blueprints, safety meetings, and supervising crews. His evenings belonged entirely to Lily. Homework. Dinner. Laundry. Bedtime stories. Weekend camping trips. It wasn't glamorous. It was exactly the life he wanted. Very few people knew what he had done before becoming a civilian. His neighbors knew him as the friendly father who helped repair bicycles. Teachers knew him as the parent who never missed school meetings. Friends knew him as someone who always arrived first when anyone needed help. Only a tiny circle knew he had once worn another uniform. And Ethan intended to keep it that way. The conference was enormous. Technology companies displayed advanced security robots. Artificial intelligence software filled giant screens. Military contractors demonstrated surveillance equipment. Business leaders exchanged expensive business cards. Lily explored every exhibit with wide eyes. Ethan simply followed behind, smiling as she asked hundreds of questions. "Dad, could this robot clean our house? It probably costs more than our house." She giggled. "What about that drone? It might accidentally deliver pizza to the neighbor." She laughed even harder. Watching her laugh made every sacrifice in his life worthwhile. By noon, everyone gathered inside the grand ballroom for Isabella Vaughn's keynote speech. She walked confidently onto the stage. "You don't become successful by hoping," she began. "You become successful through preparation. The audience applauded. She spoke about discipline, consistency, leadership, responsibility. Her stories were inspiring. Her confidence was undeniable. She explained how martial arts had shaped every business decision she had ever made. If you're mentally stronger than your opponent, she said, the battle is already over. The audience applauded again. Standing quietly near the back, Ethan listened without interruption. He agreed with much of what she said. Preparation mattered. Discipline mattered. Hard work mattered. But one sentence stayed with him. Never let anyone believe they're stronger than you. He looked down thoughtfully. Sometimes, he thought, letting people underestimate you was the safest decision of all. After the speech ended, guests lined up to meet Isabella. Lily looked up hopefully. Can we say hello? Of course. When it was finally their turn, Isabella smiled warmly for photographs. And what did you think? Lily answered immediately. You're amazing. Thank you. Then Isabella turned toward Ethan. And you? I enjoyed your presentation. She waited. You hesitated. I was thinking. What about? He smiled politely. Confidence is valuable. She folded her arms. But experience often speaks more quietly. Her smile faded slightly. So you disagree? I didn't say that. You implied it. I simply shared a thought. Before either could continue, a television reporter approached. Ms. Vaughn, your self-defense demonstrations are famous. Would anyone here volunteer? Several audience members laughed. Someone pointed toward Ethan. Him. The reporter smiled. What do you say, sir? Ethan shook his head. I'll pass. Afraid? The question echoed loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Lily looked up at her father. He gently squeezed her shoulder. No. Then why refuse? Because proving something to strangers isn't very important. A hush settled over the room. Isabella stepped closer. You assume you'd win? I assume nothing. You've trained before. A little. What style? A few. The audience chuckled. She smiled confidently. That's usually what people say after watching too many action movies. Ethan simply nodded. Perhaps. Then he took Lily's hand. Thank you for your time. Without another word, father and daughter quietly walked away, leaving Isabella watching them with growing curiosity. She had challenged many people over the years. Most reacted with pride. Some reacted with fear. No one had ever responded with such calm indifference. For reasons she couldn't explain, she suddenly wanted to know exactly who Ethan Carter really was. For the rest of the conference, Isabella couldn't stop thinking about Ethan Carter. She had faced Olympic athletes, military instructors, and world-class martial artists during seminars and demonstrations. Most of them enjoyed proving how skilled they were. Ethan had done the opposite. He had quietly walked away, carrying his daughter's backpack as though the entire challenge meant nothing. That bothered her more than she wanted to admit. 2 weeks later, her company sponsored a charity fundraiser for veterans and military families. Isabella personally attended, expecting an evening of speeches, networking, and donations. As she entered the ballroom, she spotted a familiar face. Ethan. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit, just a simple navy blazer. Lily stood beside him, smiling as she admired the silent auction displays. Before Isabella could greet them, the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, tonight we'd like to honor someone who has spent his entire life serving others. A large photograph appeared on the screen. A younger Ethan stood in desert camouflage beside a military helicopter. The room became silent. The announcer continued. Many know Ethan Carter as a devoted single father and construction manager. Few know that he served for years as a Navy SEAL, participating in missions that remained classified long after his retirement. A wave of surprise spread through the audience. Isabella stared at the screen in disbelief. The quiet man she had challenged, the man she had accused of being afraid, had once belonged to one of the world's most respected special operations forces. Another photograph appeared. Ethan stood beside his teammates, all smiling despite the harsh conditions around them. The announcer smiled. His fellow SEALs describe him with 3 words: calm under pressure. The audience rose for a standing ovation. Ethan reluctantly walked onto the stage, looking almost uncomfortable with the attention. He accepted a small award before speaking. "I appreciate this honor," he said, "but the truth is, I was never the strongest man on my team." The room listened carefully. "I simply learned something very important." He paused. "The loudest person isn't always the strongest. The strongest person is usually the one protecting everyone else." His words earned another round of applause. When the ceremony ended, Isabella walked directly toward him. "I owe you an apology." Ethan smiled kindly. "For what?" "I thought your silence meant fear." "It didn't. I judged you before I knew anything about you. That happens. I challenged you because I wanted to prove I was better." Ethan shook his head. "You didn't know me." "No. And now you do." She lowered her eyes. "I've spent years teaching confidence. And that's a good thing. But I confused confidence with needing to win." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. Real confidence doesn't need witnesses. Those simple words stayed with her. Over the following months, Isabella invited Ethan to speak at several leadership workshops for her employees. At first he refused, saying he wasn't a motivational speaker. Lily laughed. "Dad, you give speeches to me every morning." "I do? About making my bed." Everyone laughed. Eventually Ethan agreed. When he stood before hundreds of employees, he didn't tell dramatic stories about dangerous missions. Instead, he spoke about teamwork, humility, responsibility, and keeping promises. "The greatest leaders," he said, "aren't the ones who demand respect. They're the ones who earn it by serving others." The audience gave him a standing ovation. Even Isabella admitted she had learned more from his quiet wisdom than from years of leadership seminars. After the event, Lily ran onto the stage and hugged her father. "I'm proud of you." Ethan smiled. "I'm proud of you too." Isabella watched the moment and realized that Ethan's greatest achievement had never been becoming a Navy SEAL. It was becoming the kind of father his daughter admired. Months later, Isabella introduced a new leadership program inside her company. Its guiding principle was inspired by Ethan's example. Strength isn't measured by the battles you win. It's measured by the people you protect. The motto spread throughout the company, reminding employees that true leadership required humility as much as confidence. As for Ethan, he returned to his ordinary life. He supervised construction projects during the day. He attended Lily's school events. He coached her soccer team on weekends. Most people who met him never learned about his military past. And that was perfectly fine with him. Because he had never needed the world to know who he was. The people who mattered already did.